Hi, everybody. My name is Carrie Dorsky. I am the operations coordinator at the NWTC Artisan and Business Center. This is an artist journey series that we host once a month virtually from September to May, and that means there's 9 of them a year. So I always try really hard to break that up between 3 artist features, 3 business topics, and then 3 kind of community organizations. So tonight we are joined with Christina Turner from the Trout Museum in Appleton. And I'm going to turn it over to her to introduce herself, and then we'll go from there. I do like to tell everybody that if you're here live with us, feel free to drop questions in the chat. I'll keep an eye on that. And if we get to questions and answers near the end, you are absolutely welcome to unmute and ask. So, Christina, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thanks, Carrie. I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for inviting me. My name is Christina Turner. As you said, I'm the executive director at the Trout Museum of Art in downtown Appleton. I've been the executive director for 5 years, actually last month. And I'm grateful to have an opportunity to run a art museum in our community. Not very many people get to do that, and so it is an honor. And I am glad to be here today.
Absolutely. I think it's pretty exciting to be able to work in the arts in Northeast Wisconsin. I feel very, very blessed to be in that field as well. So, why don't you tell us about the Trout? When did the Trout get started, and what do you guys do there?
That's an interesting question. So the museum actually started as a group of artists getting together to paint and make art together. And that happened starting in 1960. So Phil Seeley was one of the founding artists, and he just passed a few years ago, and he was 96. And so he had been involved with the organization since that time. And in 1966, they formalized as a group of artists and became a nonprofit. And then it became the Appleton Art Center. And then we became the Trout Museum of Art. And we've moved locations several times within that time period. The thing that they did that was very memorable and still going on today is Art at the Park. So Art at the Park launched in 1960, and this year we will be in our 64th year this next summer. It's going to be on July 27th and 28th, and we've moved it several years ago to a 2-day event rather than a 1-day event. So that's sort of what sustained, I think, the organization and gave it a lot of momentum was Art at the Park back then. Artists wanting to have a place to sell art.
Absolutely, it's a wonderful event. I joined a committee up in Green Bay working on Art Fest last summer, and we were just talking about your event being that weekend, and we're going to pick, I think, a different weekend, so we don't compete because of your longstanding history. So.
Oh well, thank you very much for doing that. That is actually we appreciate that. It's always the 4th weekend in July. Always, right? So and we never vary because everything kind of moves around, right? So anyone who wants to know when we're going to have it, that's when it's going to be. It's tricky when Saturday's a first, or you know what I mean? It slices the weekend in half, but yeah.
Yep. Or like last year, there were 5 weekends in July.
Yep. So it's not the last; it's always the 4th.
It's a wonderful event, and actually, there's kind of I'll share a funny anecdote. One of my former colleagues lives in Appleton, and he attended, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 years ago now at this point, and he brought me back Kat Gottlieb's book on how to be a professional artist, and he said, "You need to meet this woman." And so I scoured the internet, I found her, I called her and took her out for coffee, and now she's one of the main mentors for our residency program. And she did this Artist Journey series last month. So I'm thankful for your event because it brought me to her, and I think she's just a wonderful resource in our community.
Yes, she is a wonderful person and a great resource for artists.
Absolutely. Okay, so tell us what your organization does and what the brick and mortar is comprised of.
So the museum is a resource for the community to learn about the visual arts. So we have exhibits, we do educational program, and we do community engagement events, which Art at the Park would be one of those. So, and those are our goals. I think that there are not as many resources for visual artists as I would love there to be. And so when we think about how we're helping our community, the bullseye, the center of that is how are we helping artists? So we want to help locally, but we want to show artists from across the state, and we want to show nationally and international artists as well. So kind of doing the whole gamut is an important aspect of what we want to do. We have classes and camps for art for artists of about 8 to adult. And so we've really been growing that program over the last 5 years. There aren't a lot of places that you can take classes in our larger community. And so we're providing one of that resource as well.
Awesome. And then I know you guys do like an annual juried exhibition. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, it's called Tema Contemporary. And we have I don't know, about 400 to 450 people apply every year. And we take about 100 artists, maybe 110 at the very most. And it's a juried exhibition where we pick, I'm one of the jurors, but we pick 2 other jurors that are from somewhere across the state of Wisconsin to be the jurors to select those artists to be in the exhibition. And then our curator, Ann Weave, will curates the show. And then we open it up typically on Saturday night so that all the artists from all over the state can journey to the museum to come see their friends, see the work, and to talk and just have a wonderful time at the opening.
Awesome. That's always one that I recommend people apply to in our area. There's not a ton of juried exhibitions in kind of Northeast Wisconsin, but that's, I think, a highlight in our community.
Yeah, I love it too. I think it's really fun because I get to look at work. Look at the work every year. So I then you get to know all the artists' work and you see how they're changing. But we always have lots of new people apply too, which is always interesting to me. So not every artist applies every year, right? They apply when they feel like they have something they want to share, typically, I think.
I think so too. I also think that, managing all of the deadlines for juried shows can be a full-time job. If you're applying to shows and markets and all of that, and you've got probably a big year-long calendar. And I also think that, we've talked to artists. We did a whole artist journey series on how to best apply to calls for art. And I think that's an important part of being a professional artist and making sure you navigate that and pick and choose the ones that best fit the art you're making. How about tell us about your residency program, because that's something our community can apply for, right?
Right. Yes, we do have an artist in residency program. Ann Weave, our curator, and Valerie Medina, our art education manager, both work together to select the artist in resident. And so you can apply online. There's a small fee to apply, and then you get a stipend each month for the time that you're a resident. It's 4 months roughly. So there's 3 cycles a year. The artists have an opportunity to teach if they want to. They have opportunities to do other things related to the museum. So you get to sort of craft what you're doing. You get a solo show at the end of it, and so those are when you apply, people kind of apply with, hey, this is what I'd like to get out of it, and then they try to work with them to try to make that happen. And you get a space. It's actually reasonably, it's a weird space, but it's also a cool space because it's on the 5th floor of our building, which is in downtown Appleton, which is the kind of Mac Daddy view up College Avenue towards the PAC and down. So it's got really good like a view window wise. And so there's several rooms. So you have like a storage room, kind of a communal room, and then there are several other rooms too that you can kind of work in and do what you want to do. And it's yours to use how you want to use it. But so I started the program because I think it's really important to have an artist in residency program. I think it brings in new thinking and gives artists an opportunity to work closely with the museum, so it doesn't feel so mysterious or scary to think that, oh, I can't talk to the people at the museum or what have you. I mean, that's not true, right? So one of the things that's really valuable to us is to have the museum not feel like something that is intimidating in some way or scary in some way. So we want to see art and artists grow in our community and in our world. And so we want to help provide ways to do that. And the artist in residency program is something I'm really looking forward to. And I'm anxious to see how that might expand as we partner with Lawrence moving forward in a new building. And so I'm excited for what ways we can collaborate with them. And the artist in residency program might end up being one of those.
That's very cool. So you said there's cycles. So you kind of take applications multiple times throughout the year?
3 times a year. I think so. It's like a spring cycle, a summer cycle, and a fall cycle, just being general, right? So that I think the summer months align so that someone who's like a teacher at a school can have the majority of that time off. Yep. Or that kind of thing, right? So that's typically, I don't know the exact dates. You'd have to check our website for that, but that's typically the way the cycle works.
That's very cool. I love that it's ongoing like that. That's great. Is there any kind of restrictions to mediums? Do you take everybody?
We do. It's tricky. I mean, we have someone who applied that's like they work with fire, and I'm like, can someone? We have to check our insurance. Like, let's just be realistic, right? We've had other people that are real performance based. I'm thinking that might not be a fit for the space that we have and the type of shows that we could actually put on, right? But we at least entertain those, right? So it's we're trying to be as broad as possible, but some things logistically sometimes might not work, right?
Absolutely. That's really cool, though. I think that's a great resource in our community. I don't know of a lot of residency programs, or traditional residency programs, I should say, in the area. I know there's a couple up in Door County and then you guys, but that's about it right around here. What other ways can artists get involved with the Trout?
Well, we have you can teach. We teach lots of classes each month, and we teach week-long summer camps. So summer camp is like a Monday through Friday sort of time frame, and it's in the summertime. And then we teach classes at night and on the weekends. And so artists who have ideas for classes or want to teach and like to teach will reach out to our education manager, Valerie Medina, and talk with her about ideas that they have for classes. And we do a wide range of classes. I love Valerie's creativity for classes. So she likes, when she first came on, she goes, I think we have to get really specific. And I was like, what does that mean? She goes, she believes if you kind of double down on how specific it is, people get more interested, especially those that may not necessarily know a ton about art, but really want to get involved. So we have a class that instead of having a painting class, she has a paint your pet class. So everyone brings a picture of their pet and they get to paint their pet. That class fills up every time. It is just people want to paint their dog or their cat or their gerbil or whatever it is, right? And so like that's an example. So we may have a class like that, but then we might have an oil painting class as well. We also like have a wreath making class like at Christmas time, or the crazy things for Halloween. She does is like, make a haunted birdhouse. And I'm like, what? So then people are painting and decorating these elaborate birdhouse kind of things, or do a macrame bat. Right. And so these are much more craft based. And I hate the distinction between craft and art. So excuse me that I actually even use that term. But there are more materials that have not been associated with being in a museum necessarily, although we have shown macrame multiple times in our museum because actually it's been a fun medium that has become really popular and people have made it into a really kind of advanced art form. And so I find it really interesting myself, but it's something that someone who doesn't know or feels afraid to learn how to oil paint, they can glom on to, I'm going to make a macrame bat for Halloween. And if I have fun with that, then I'm going to move on to paint your pet. And if I have fun with that, I'll move on to oil painting. Right. And so there can be this sort of progression, but teaching. And so is an opportunity. And what I'm saying is you don't have to be a printmaker to teach a class, although we'd love to have you if you are a printmaker and would like to teach a class. But there are lots of ways to get involved. We have jewelry classes,
Very cool. We always say that those kinds of classes, if somebody can feel successful when they walk out the door, that means they'll come back and try something again. So even if it is just a macrame bat, we do the same kind of thing. And I love your touch on craft. My background is fibers and textiles before I moved into painting. So I am also passionate about that word. And then our facility is quilting, ceramics, wood turning, and jewelry metal. So we very much live in that craft or fine art world.
I went to the California College of Arts and Crafts at the time when I went to school there in San Francisco. So that's where I did my MFA. And it's now CCA, just California College of Arts. But at that time, there was this whole argument about like what I think it's I find it an interesting argument that has very little meaning in today's world, like but back in 2000 in 5 or whatever, when they made the change, it was somehow this big argument, right? And I all art is art, and it can be all mediums, and it's not really much else to say.
Totally agree. Okay, so you've talked on your MFA a little bit. What kind of advice would you give to artists who are looking to maybe work in museums or work more closely with museums, or maybe they would like to go get their MFA?
That's a big question. Okay, so there's like 4 questions in there. Right. First, what is it? So working at a museum, well, there's not a lot of them, right? There's not a ton of art museums. We have several in our community, but not tons. And if you want to work at the art museum, you need to reach out and say you want to work at the art museum. And if you want to work at the art museum, you need to be a constituent of the art museum. That means you go to events. You reach out and do things with the museum. The people that I hire typically are people that are already part of the community that we're trying to serve in an art capacity, right? If you say you want to work at the museum and you've lived in Neenah for 10 years and you've never been to the museum, I don't believe you, right? So there's a little bit of that, right? So we want people that care deeply about the mission of having an art museum, whether you work as the accountant or you work at the front desk or you work in marketing, or my job, this is a deeply held mission that you care about the visual arts and the impact that it can make on people's lives, to bring joy, to heal trauma, to do many, many things that art does for us when we experience something that touches us. And so that's first and foremost, right?
I think and what I always tell people is, relationships and community building, and as an artist, it can be a really kind of isolating choice. But if you are involved in your community organizations and work with your local museums and education facilities and galleries and things like that, you kind of find that sense of community and build that relationship and can make more happen in your career by building those things and being more, personable, and being more, I don't know what the word is that I'm trying to think of, but being more invested, maybe.
Well, and also, the perfect example is Sam Thompson, who's a ceramicist here in Appleton. He works part-time as a VSA at the front desk solely to be part of the community of artists. He meets people, he does installs with us. So when we're doing install, he works more full-time, right? But then he does this so that when he's making, it's more, not isolating, maybe too strong, but you're really focused and you're working on your work like we all are, right? But then he has this opportunity to be part of and meeting all these other artists and other people working in his medium and those types of things. So it's a win-win for us because we get an amazing artist that gets to help be a great VSA as opposed to someone who just has customer service skills, right? And so we like to pick artists to help in those capacities because they have more skill sets that we're looking for. And so it's not typically someone that comes from working at the mall that comes to work as a VSA. It's an artist who's looking for part-time work to fulfill some enrichment aspect, or they just want to make a little bit more money, right? Something like that, right?
Yep, I had one of our former residents, I think it was 2 years ago, ask me if she could spend some time. We do an annual showcase at the Neville Museum each year, and she asked if she could spend some time with their curator and help with that install. And it turned out to be such a beneficial opportunity for her because as an artist who's applying to shows, they don't often get to see the behind the scenes. What does it take to curate a show? What does it take to lay that all out and understand how it's going to be perceived by people and enjoyed by people, and then also to understand the issues. If there's not a hanging wire or a frame, or if something breaks, or display cases and all of that. So I do think as an artist, it's a really great way to get to see how it works on the other side of things. We do have a question in the chat. I'm going to read that one quick. It says, what about the made to order program? How do we become more involved with that / apply?
Oh, right. Yeah. So for made to order, so we don't do this every year. So we just did it this year. We'll do it in 3 years, right? So it's kind of a once every 3 year idea. So typically we invite artists to do made to order, and we try to mix up. So we don't do the same artists every time we do it, because people who want to commission. So so everyone knows, like, made to order is a commissioning event. So the idea is that we find people that want to buy art and pair them up with people that want to make art, right? And it's been great because it's not here in Appleton and the greater Fox cities, we don't have this really robust gallery system where artists have lots of choices for where they could sell their work, right? And so we're trying to get people who collect or have capacity to buy original art to think about, gee, I could reach out to an artist and have them commission something for me. Now, not everyone is into commissioning work, right? Having or into having their work commissioned, right? They're not looking for a collaboration with someone else. But for those of people who are, it's been really fun way for artists to understand how the commissioning process work, and then commissioners to become collectors, right? And to think, oh my gosh, I don't have to buy that poster at Pottery Barn. I can actually, for the same amount of money, get something from someone local that's making something cool and original and unique and authentically mine, and something I collaborated with the artists on. And it's not just that end product, but it's the collaborative experience, right? I got to meet an artist and work with them. And for someone who is not an artist, it is a very creative process, right? And they get a little hooked and they want to do it again, right? So if someone wants to be a made to order artist, they can always reach out and say, I would like to be considered to be a made to order artist. Now, again, we're not doing it for 3 more years, so don't reach out today. But that's what I would suggest to do when so we're at 2023, 24, 25. In 2026, probably the end of 2025, probably the last quarter of 25, we will be so like September through January, we will be looking for artists for that. We'll launch get doing commissions in January, and then we'll do the shows probably in September. That's how we've done it in the past. But we have to give artists enough time to make the art, so it kind of takes a whole year to do it. But that would be the time frame, August of 25, to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested.
That's awesome. And then that does culminate in an exhibition, right?
Yes.
How long are your exhibitions typically?
They vary. So 2 months to 4 months typically.
Very cool. Um, this is just a kind of a nerdy question off the top of my head because I have a background in museums and that's where I worked before coming to this job. How far out is your exhibition schedule planned?
Typically 2 years. It's hard to slot things in. So people are like, "Hey, can we do this exhibition in 6 weeks?" No, no, no. Uh, so no. There a rare occasion where something changes, possibly, right? And we sometimes we do move things around a little bit but typically 2 years. Right now we are in the midst of trying to plan the new facility, and so that has put us that's making things more complicated, right? So we're trying to plan for two spaces at the same time, which is uh, like I said, just an additional layer of
Absolutely. I
planning.
think it's important for the average artist to understand that when they engage or work with a museum or an organization like that, that the planning is done years in advance. You know?
Absolutely, 2 years. And
Yep.
I would guess as we move into the new space down the street, we will, some things will be even, will be 3 to 4 years out, right? And it's interesting because as a curator, you're talking to someone today that you're not going to be showing for 2 years, and then you're also talking to people that are dropping off stuff tomorrow for an exhibit that's going out in 2 weeks. So you're working on all the exhibits that you're doing all the time, right? So if we do 12 to 18 exhibits a year, and we'll probably be doing closer to 25. So you're working on probably 50 exhibits at any given time all at once, right?
Yep.
And that takes a lot of coordination um, and just real planning skills.
Absolutely. I'm working with the curator at the Neville on their next 3-year cycle to start planning when our annual showcase will be. And I remember I worked up in Door County at a museum for a few years, and oftentimes you do feel like you're talking to somebody right in front of you about something that they're is like immediate. It's their only focus. And my brain's over here like 6 months down the road or thinking about the next 6 events I'm working on. So it's important, I think, for artists to realize that, they may be making something right now or they may be dropping something off right now. Um, but that person or that kind of professional organization is juggling a lot of other things and maybe they're not your exact number one priority.
I mean, Anne, we have again our curator. She's a zero in boxer. She is the master of organization and without that,
Yep.
it's a very difficult job. So having that level of detail and organizational ability and having a discerning eye to be able to curate creatively people's works is a very tricky combination to find in an employee at a smaller organization where you don't have 5, 6, 7, 8 curators. It is, but it's a difficult job. But it's a really rewarding. It's very fun. It's a very fun job. Curating is again, this is philosophical. Now we can talk about curating for a long time here. So there is very different curatorial philosophies, right? So different organizations do things differently, have a different point of view on that. From my perspective, I believe that let's take Team of Contemporary, for example. That show only has one work of art from each artist, maybe two or three if they're small, and there's a reason that we took a series or something for that show. But making sure that each work of art is sitting in the exhibit next to other works of art that accentuate and bring that work to life rather than detract from that work of art is way harder than you think it is. Like when you lay stuff out and you're like, oh my gosh, these two next to each other this can't happen. So then where's the right spot where it just feels like this is correct, this is as it should be. And as the ED, I'm extremely fussy about, like, if I walk in and I'm like, nope, this this has to change, right? So I do get the final say. This is a curation, and I care deeply about things being curated in a way that when I come in, that's our art in a way. The museum's art is the curation. And when I look at a wall and there's pieces on it, this should just make me feel it's perfect the way it is, right? And so we work very hard to hit that spot the way we think we should for each artist's work. And we spend hours discussing / arguing / having fun, talking about what we're trying to do with every piece.
For sure. That's your reputation, you know, when somebody walks in that space and if it's not curated well, it's not gonna fly. So
no.
As you were talking, I thought of a good point, and you were talking about the work of a curator and how much they're juggling. And I think for artists to recognize that that's why it's important to fill out the forms correctly, to do, you know, to fill out the ZAP application correctly, to drop off when they're supposed to drop off and pick up when they're supposed to pick up. Those kinds of little things make a big difference in professionalism. One of our artist journey series, we talked all about the best professional practices for an artist and how to make sure you engage in a professional manner, because that stuff matters. And if the curator's trying to chase you down to collect a piece of artwork, they're not going to want to continue to do business with you. So as you were circling around all of that and talking about that work and how it can be really fun, but it's also really challenging, I was like, you know, artists can make it easier on the curator if they do things the right way.
So. It is so true. I mean, I'll give a whole bunch of examples of that. I'm going to say that, you know, we have some people that drop off a piece of work and they're like, here it is. And it just, you know, here it is, just like this. And then I have other people that, you know, have it in a pristine box where they have they've taken our logo off the website, and then they have their thing, and they've got everything about themselves. And then there's a perfect, here's how to install my piece, exactly how they want it done. And you're like, and then that we're like, when we get a piece that's a complicated installation piece, if we have a step by step from the artist, we will follow that to the letter. And if we can't for some reason, we'll reach out to you and say, okay, this is what are we doing here, right? And if we're just hanging a painting, we have, here's how we're hanging the painting. That's not really complex. But when people just drop off a work without no bubble wrap, no nothing, right? And you're like, okay, like, do you care about your work, right? Like, it's going to go sit in our vault, right? And it's interesting to me, the difference that we can see from, you know, from pieces that are done.
No. I'm sorry. Did I freeze, or are you guys frozen?
I think there's a lot of video on, and maybe that, I don't know.
Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you, but other people were frozen for a second.
Okay.
So Carrie, did you hear what I was saying or no?
I missed that last little bit.
I don't even know what I said. I'm just saying that there's a big difference between what people present to us. So some people have very elaborate packages and package their stuff up, and you know, we take it in, we document what it looks like, we take photos of it, all that kind of stuff, so that we know what we got, so that we get it back to you in same condition. But you caring about your own brand as an artist and telling us what you want if there's something special, and us trying to help make that happen, but also just providing it to us in a way that helps us keep your work safe, is very helpful. And I will tell you, what you were saying is absolutely true. If you're a difficult artist to work with, every curator in the state will know that, because they all talk when they want to do a solo show, and we're talking about doing a solo show to 2-3 artists. We're like, well, this one's harder to work with. This one, I'm not sure that they will have a big enough body of work by the time that we've said, because we're not sure that they're going to be diligent about working to get that many pieces that are new. And so you can be a wonderful artist, but if you're a full-time engineer and you're making your work on the weekend and you're trying to get a solo show, like I question how are you going to be able to do that, right? So proving that you are organized and can do those types of things, and having Anne say, yeah, I understand that that person has a full-time job, but they did a great job at ours. We'll get calls from other curators from other institutions, and they'll be, how was it working with them? And that is the truth. And you have to understand that the curators in the museum can totally help your career, but if you're not helping them put on the very best show for you, you're not helping yourself.
Absolutely. I wrote down 2 notes while you were talking. I remember when I was jurying a show once and I opened a crate and there were handwritten directions, and then they actually even drew out beautiful diagrams. And I thought, this is what I want. So the advice I often give artists is err on the side of over communication. You know, if there's something complicated, yeah, handwrite out all those directions, draw diagrams, maybe have a meeting with the curator. Maybe it's in person, but I think more is more.
More is more. I'm going to say one caveat to that. No, there's one, being communicative and telling all these things. And when we open that package, we're like, oh, that's just like it. Like, thank you. We're totally happy. But then there's being a diva that moves beyond that communication to, and I want this, and I want that, and I don't like the space you're giving me. I want this space, and so I want that. Like, so there's. And not that we don't want to listen to the artist. I'm not saying we're not listening, but there is that it can flip to something that doesn't feel collaborative or doesn't feel, I can't really describe what I'm saying, but I think you understand what I'm saying. It's sort of like I'm the cool artist, or I'm the diva rock star artist that make everyone like talks about, wow, that person was,
Yep.
needed this X, Y, or Z, right?
At the end of the day, it is the Trout Museum and you are the executive director, so it's not this artist's own individual gallery. It is a collaborative endeavor.
And some people are like, have this attitude like they're somehow renting space, right? It's like, you are not. No. It's a museum, right? It's like there are other places you can do that, but it's not our facility, right?
That's the reason you have a curator, right?
Yes.
Okay, I would love to circle back and talk about you and your background, because I think that's really intriguing.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. We, the 6 of us at the Artisan Center, like to pride ourselves on all being artists, and that it's important to the organization that we run that we are also making, because I think there are a lot of organizations where maybe they don't have any artists on their board, and there's things like that. So I would love to know about your background, and maybe your team's background. Are you all artists? Do you have, obviously you have your MFA, so I would love to know a little bit about that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. All right. So we, it's interesting, is everyone on our team an artist? No. But because our finance director's not an artist. However, her husband is, right? And she probably visits more art institutions, exhibits than a lot of the other staff members, which is ironic, really. But so she has a strong interest because her husband's a photographer. And so I think that we look for board members and staff members that have an art background, have a strong interest in art, art history, and also bring a new voice to the conversation. Like Anna Burkham is an attorney at Sigmund Jansen in downtown Appleton, and she's one of our board members, right? So she went to Lawrence and majored in art history, and her mom was a professional artist. And so she's an attorney, so that has nothing, but she has this long history of like, this is what it was like to have an artist as a mom who was a professional artist. And I studied this in college, right? And so she's not coming raw as just an attorney to the background, but we need an attorney. We would like an attorney on our board, right? Or probably more than one, right? And so this is the kind of combination that we're looking for in people's backgrounds. People who are deeply, John Brogan, who owns the Bank of Kaukauna, chairman, he has a huge art collection, is extremely interested in the visual arts, and is on our board and is our finance chair, right? So we want to have people that have those interests involved. Same like Ashley Acker is our marketing person. She has an art degree. But she's doing marketing. She has a marketing degree, but she also has an art background. So nearly anyone on our staff, if we're setting up for an exhibit and there's got to be creative painting involved, like we did a couple shows where we had to do kind of murals and some other interesting work. I'm painting clouds sometimes or helping out, right? So we all are capable of doing that work if we needed to. With a couple exceptions, right? But for the most part, people have a background where they could do the work and they understand why it's important they understand why art's important, right?
Less than 6 degrees from a connection to art.
Yeah, absolutely. That pretty much, I mean, it's a rare exception. When I first came on the board, came to the museum as the ED, that wasn't the case. It wasn't the case that the employees had any real background to that. And the board were more community leaders that cared about having good cultural centers within the community, which is highly valuable. I want people that care deeply about that have business acumen and that's where it was before me. But since I've been here, I care about those things, but it has to be the right fit in terms of loving the visual arts. Because then if they don't love it, then they can't really understand why we're doing our mission.
I totally agree. I feel like I had a few other questions in there. Tell us about you personally. What is your background?
I am from Menasha, Wisconsin, originally. So I'm from this area. I went to Menasha High School. I graduated from the University of Wisconsin-Madison in a political science and economics degree. And then I moved to San Diego and did a degree in international relations. I worked for 10 years in publishing. So I sold books around the world, and I worked in international sales. So I travel all over. And then I ran the marketing department as well for that company. And then when I quit doing that, I went back to school and did an undergraduate, a BFA, and then did an MFA at the California College of the Arts. While I worked as a TA for the provost of the university, Steve Beal. He's just retiring now. And I was an older student, obviously, right? And had a big business background. And so I would talk with him about running a school and what it was like and that kind of thing. So when I was graduating, he said, can you just come and please help us by being our director of graduate admissions? So I went, instead of working as an artist, I went, and he wanted to change how they accepted artists and what they were looking at, what they were doing. So I would bring in the class, but we had about 100 graduate students at that time. So I looked at tons of art and looked at younger people's portfolios and talked to them about, this is what you should do, this is what you should think about, that kind of thing. And then I ended up moving back here about 10 years ago. After I lived in San Diego, I lived in Los Angeles, I lived in San Francisco. I lived that starting in 1990 till about 2013. And then I moved back here about about 10 years ago. And then about 5 years ago, I took this job. So, yeah, I'm trying to think what else I would say. Oh, you know what I want to say? I've got something I just want to add in. I'm going to ask and answer my own question, right? So, I get this question, or I used to get this question all the time, where people would be like, okay, my kid wants to go to art school, and what are they going to do with an art degree and all that stuff? So I'm going to here's the poster child right here. Okay, so I did an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in a non-art field. And I did an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in an art field. So I am your experiment on like what this looks like, right? And so this is what I would tell those parents. So when you go to art school, you're expected to create a body of work and think about that body of work in relationship to what's happening in the larger art community. And so you're going to be in dialogue with what's happening with that. Okay, so at the end of that time period, you will put on a show. You probably have to write some sort of thesis about your show. Even if it's just an undergrad, you usually have to have some documentation that does it. You will have to defend your show to your faculty and to your peers and to people that are coming in. You have to market it. You have to install it. You have to, put your name on the wall in vinyl and do all those things, right? At least that's how it was where I went to art school. Now, when I went to school and got a degree at Madison, very good school in economics, at no point was I asked to come up with my own economic theory that we should be now considering or adopting, or even being asked to be part of the dialogue about how economic theory is advancing in the larger world. No one cared about my opinion or my thoughts about this after 4 years of college. They cared, could I regurgitate Reaganomics? I'm showing my age here. Could I regurgitate Keynesian theory, right? Do I understand Mill? Do I understand Locke? I'm like, so these are philosophers, right? And it's all great things to know, and I'm grateful to know it. But at no point did they say, Christina, raise your hand and stand up and tell us what you think about what should be happening next. At 4 years at an art school, that is decidedly not the case. They care deeply about what you're trying to donate to or give to the community. And because of that, you understand project management. You understand how to defend your arguments about something. You understand like how to troubleshoot when things aren't going right. I don't have to just sit down and take a 200 multiple choice test at the end of the year. Yep, got an A. It's a way different process, and it parallels. Even if you're going to get a job working in the design department at KC, it parallels what you have to do in that corporate job way closer than what I did with my economic degree. So there's my pitch for a 4-year degree in art puts you, I would even say, ahead of someone who is majoring in, another liberal arts for the reasons the problem solving, the collaboration, the needing to get feedback and to put out your own ideas and be shattered a little bit if people say they suck. And having to then go in and retool and okay, why wasn't it good? What do I need to do differently? Right. So it's I think it's a really powerful education choice. Now, if you're going to want to be an accountant, no, of course not. But for anyone trying to do something that has any project management types of skills, it definitely is.
Absolutely. I wrote down kind of teaches you resilience, and it kind of educates you as a whole person.
Yeah.
I won't go off on a huge tangent, but about myself, for those of you that don't know, I started off as a full art major. That was my plan, and I was introduced to arts management and nonprofit management a couple years into my career and made that decision, and I think it's the best thing I ever coupled with my BFA. So there's my little 2 cents of, you know, that kind of project management. And we often talk about how I run an artisan and business center, and that's a really kind of weird line to sit on, is arts and creativity, but also business and administration and bookkeeping and spreadsheets and all of those things. I love data and numbers, but I also love to be very creative. And I think um, it's important for artists to kind of consider their place and how that works. And like you said, kind of project management, I think that's really important. And that's a huge skill set that if you don't have as an artist, how do you self-motivate and get things done?
Well, this is the thing. It is 100% self-motivation, right? The best thing you can do as an artist is not stop, right? And it is a weird journey, right? So when you're whatever you're doing, the first step, that first mark you make, after that, there's infinite possibilities, right? And then the second mark, there's just, it narrows and then narrows and narrows until there's only one mark left that you can make, and then you're done, right? But understanding when done is, getting started, understanding when done is, are the two hardest parts of being an artist. And so you can miss those windows so easily. And the idea that the decision making gets narrowed and narrowed and narrowed, and there's a time frame where you're kind of in your zone, right? And you're making, and you're in your zone, and then you're like unsure what you're doing at the beginning, and then at the end you're like, oh my gosh. And this is when you go to your friends, and is this done? How does this look? Do you like this? Right? Because a work of art is a dialogue between two people, or you and your community, or whatever, through that work of art. And it's, if I see artists that write these amazing artist statements, their thinking is amazing, but their work doesn't show that, right? And I see the reverse. It's like, this person's doing this amazing work, but they have no idea why. And they can't articulate, they just go and do, right? And both of those, in 2023, missing one of those two components is a miss in general, right? Because the expectation is that you make something amazing and you understand why, and you can articulate about it. And typically we expect it to be about something that that for whatever reason we care about, right? And that can be beauty. And historically, a lot of art was just about beauty, but it also can be about a whole host of other wonderful topics, thank God, because it allows for so many rich works of art by so many people that are interesting and that can change and touch my life every day, right? And that's the part that is so enjoyable about, being around art, is that it feeds your soul, it nurtures your health and well-being. If you're willing to take the time to understand what you're looking at and why someone made it, but you have to do it by looking at that work and then dialoguing with the artist. And the artist has to be, can't just be like, well, I told you this, and I was like, well, that's not what I saw. So then the artist has to hear that and say, okay, now I've got to find a way to actually say what I'm missing. I'm not, that's not what they saw. And so how do I change? How do I alter without, you don't need to listen to someone and do exactly what they say. That's not the point. You need to hear what they're saying and then do what's right for your work of art. Now, on occasion, it will be exactly what they said, but mostly that's not true. It's like you interpreting what they said in your own work, right? And just making that a wonderful, right? So when you get criticism, you should take it as this huge opportunity to grow. But that strength of character that is required in order to do that is tricky sometimes.
I think that's great advice to kind of wrap up our hour here, and the importance of being able to articulate and talk about what you're doing. I think sometimes that's the hardest part for artists, is that they can make beautiful works of art, but they either lack the vocabulary or they haven't done the work to really be able to talk about it or take that feedback or adjust their communication skills. So I love that. Thank you for ending on that note. I think that was really wonderful. And I hope everybody understands the importance of being able to talk about your work and take feedback as you're making and putting yourself out there. And we have 5 minutes left. So if anybody has any questions for Christina, please feel free to unmute yourselves and ask, or type it in the chat and I'll read it. Otherwise, we can sit here for a moment. And if Christina, if you have any other final thoughts, we can go with that.
I mean, I'm just trying to think like what it would be my final thoughts. I think for an artist, my big advice would be the first one in your studio, be the last to leave. Make sure you're communicating with people well. That doesn't mean you have to answer within 5 minutes, but it would be nice if you answered within 24 to 48 hours, anyone who emails you. Care deeply about your reputation as a human being, and what your work you're doing. Do the best work you can possibly do with what you're doing, and just remember that it's supposed to be fun. And if you're doing beautiful work, wonderful work that is touching people, like it is, it's extremely powerful in building community. I think in our world today, if I have a work of artwork that I can talk about politics through, or other touchy subjects with people that I know have differing points of view from me, I can use that artwork as a focal point to have those sort of courageous conversations about that, without it being personal, without it getting voices being raised, hostilities. We have a lot of people that it's them versus us sort of attitude. And I think art can be that can hold the conversation in a really beautiful way if we allow it to. And so when people make interesting art about politics, especially, I think that it can be this thing that helps people grow and think, without it being, a conversation that where everyone is not listening, but just talking.
I think about, while you're talking, I'm thinking a lot about my own art and how, I do run a full-time job, right? I have a full-time, more than 40 hours a week job. And so I don't often get in the studio as much as I would like, but I think about what I'm trying to say and what's in, what drives my practice. And I think that's probably something we should all be doing, is thinking about why we make, what we're trying to say, what our point of view is, how we share our perspective, and how we contribute to our community. Okay, if anybody else doesn't have any questions, I am going to wrap us up here and say thank you all very much, Christina. This was lovely. It was nice getting to know you, to hear more about the trout. And that hour went by really fast. So thank you all for being here with us. I will have this edited by our team and get it posted on our social media yet this week, and we'll go from there. Feel free to reach out if anybody has any questions. And Christina, what is the website to the trout?
Oh, we're at troutmuseum.org is our website. We would love to see you. Our openings are free to the public. We have membership starts at $15. So for a year, and we have classes year round. If artists want to teach or want to take classes, you can check our website, and you can also see what exhibitions we have coming up on our website. Or our social media. Facebook and Instagram and we do TikTok, but that's less so than the other two. And I'm just very grateful to be invited to share a little bit about what I do in my life at the museum, and very passionate about what we do. And I am very passionate about what all of you do, and anything that I can do to help hold all that, so that we can make a better world through art. I want to do.
Wonderful. Thanks so much for sharing your time with us tonight. I really appreciate it. And we are at 5 o'clock on the nose, so I am going to shut us down. Have a great night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.